Soon. Today, we're jumping forward a little. Hopefully the front row here will behave grace. And we're still on a mountain. But this time, 40 years have passed. And so now, for the last 40 years, Moses has been leading the people of Israel through the wilderness. And they're standing right on the edge of the land of Canaan, which is the land of milk and honey, the land where everything is going to be so good. And you'll remember last week how we talked about that Moses was 80 when he encountered God in the burning bush, so now he's 120, and he knows that his time on this earth will not last much longer. In fact, Moses knows that he himself will never step foot into the promised land. So Moses gives, leading up to today, kind of his last speech, his last will and testament. And we're going to turn to chapter 6 in just a moment. But before we do, I want to draw our attention to chapter 5, because here Moses says, and this is important, listen to what Moses says to the people of Israel before they go into the land of milk and honey. Remember, so they're standing on the mountain, they're getting ready to journey in, and in the 5th chapter, leading up to our scripture for today, in the verses 2 and 3, Moses says to everyone gathered here, "The Lord our God made a covenant with us at Horeb. Not only with our ancestors did the Lord make this covenant, but with us who were alive here today." And then in just a second, we're going to jump to today's scripture. But when Moses says that, Moses made a covenant with us, he is not factually correct. You see, the people of Israel, who had been wandering for 40 years, were the second generation of ancestors. Most of that first generation, who had been under the leadership of Moses in the burning bush, had already died and passed away. But Moses says to them, no, God has made a covenant with us. God made a covenant with us. And so then, as part of that covenant, Moses is essentially saying to the Israelites there today, there that day, the second generation, and to us this day, in all the generations before and yet to come, Moses is saying God makes a covenant with us, a promise with us. And so part of what the faith intends for us to do is to not only be informed by the stories of the scripture, but also to be transformed. So as we lead into today's scripture, Moses wants us to hear that we make a promise over and over and over with God, because God has made a promise, a covenant with us. And once we remember that covenant and that teaching, then Moses gets to kind of the heart of his final lecture. This in the Jewish tradition is called the Shema. It's supposed to be said twice a day if you're a devout Jew. And now we can pull up the scripture for that today. It's in the 6th chapter of Deuteronomy. And this is what Moses says. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your might. Keep these words that I am commanding to you today in your heart. Recite them to your children. Talk about them when you are at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you rise. Bind them as a sign on your hand. Fix them as an emblem on your forehead. Write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates." So you see what Moses is doing here. It's two different things. Number one, Moses is reminding us that God has made a promise, a covenant with us, a promise that we can renew all the time. And number two, that Moses is instructing us to love God and God alone, and then to love our neighbors as ourselves. So this week, as I was thinking about our scripture for today and World Communion Sunday, and about how the purpose of the text of the scripture is both to inform and to transform, I thought to myself, so how do we see this play out in our lives today? What does the scripture look like in action? And Jesus knew these parts of the scripture well. The scribes of the day tried to trick him up one time and asked him what's the most important commandment, and Jesus recited the Shema, the passage that we just heard from them. And then I started to read the news for this week. And you may have seen this story played out. It's been on the news quite a bit, but it's the story of a trial this week that took place in Texas. So an off-duty police officer entered into an apartment that she said she thought was her own, and she shot an unarmed black man who was eating a bowl of ice cream and was 26 years old. His name was Botham. He went by Bo. Have you seen this story in the news? Well, so the trial took place and everything, and she was found guilty, and then it was time for the sentencing, right? And at the sentencing hearing, there was the opportunity for family members of Botham to come forth and to share whatever it is they wanted to say. And so I watched this, right? And I watched in awe as the brother, 18 years old, the brother of the man who was killed, sat there in the witness stand. And I want to read to you first what he said, and then we're going to show the video clip of it, but it's a little hard to hear. But he says this to the woman who has just been convicted of murdering his brother. He says this: "If you truly are sorry, I can speak for myself. I forgive, and I know if you go to God and ask him, he will forgive you. I don't think anyone can say it. Again, I'm speaking for myself, but I love you just like anyone else." Remember that scripture commandment for today? I'm not going to say, "I hope you rot and die just like my brother did," but presently I want the best for you. I wasn't ever going to say this in front of my family or anyone, but I don't even want you to go to jail. I want the best for you because I know that's exactly what both of them would want you to do. The best would be to give your life to Christ. I'm not going to say anything else. I think giving your life to Christ would be the best thing that both of them would want you to do. Again, I love you as a person, and I don't wish anything bad on you. And then he says, and we're going to watch this clip in just a moment, "I don't know if this is possible, but can I give her a hug, please? Please." So let's watch the video now.
So I forgive you.
I turn it up as loud as I can.
And I know if you go to God and ask him, he will forgive you. And I don't think anyone could say it. Again, I'm speaking for myself, not even bad for my family. But I love you just like anyone else. And I'm not gonna say I hope you rot and die just like my brother did, but I personally want the best for you. And I wasn't gonna ever say this in front of my family or anyone, but I don't even want you to go to jail. I want the best for you. Because I know that's exactly what both of them would want you to do. And the best would be give your life to Christ. I'm not gonna say anything else. I think giving your life to Christ would be the best thing that both of them would want you to do. Again, I love you as a person. and I don't wish anything bad on you. I don't know if this is possible, but can I give her a hug, please? Please?
Yes.
That's good, Gabby. Thank you. It's a powerful clip, right? I don't know how that young man found the strength to do that. Later in an interview, several days later, he said he had no idea that the cameras were recording. He thought that had all concluded at the end of the trial. He wasn't doing it to make a statement or anything like that. He said that he was simply doing it because that's what he felt called by Christ to do. And so in our passage this morning, on that final sermon from the mountain, Moses tells the people of God today and back then to love your God and God alone, and to love your neighbor as yourself. If you want to follow the teachings of Christ, the teachings of God, these are the words to remember, the words to recite, the words to share with your children. May we all find such courage and such faith. Through Christ we say together, Amen.